My uncle smiled at me across the probate lawyer's conference table the same way he smiled at my grandmother's funeral, like a man who had already won. He had no idea I had spent the previous night photographing every page of the real will. But I'm getting ahead of myself. Let me tell you what happened first. Before I tell you exactly how I walked out of that office, with everything my grandmother left me and walked my uncle straight into a fraud investigation, tell me in the comments. What is one thing a family member did to you that you never fully forgave? I read every single one. My name is Claire. I am 32 years old, and I work as a title examiner for a real estate law firm in Calgary, Alberta. My entire job is reading documents, catching forged signatures, and finding the one line buried in 40 pages of paperwork that changes everything. I have spent 7 years learning how to spot the moment a document lies to you. My family apparently forgot that. My grandmother, Nora, passed away in November, just 3 weeks before her 81st birthday. She had lived alone in the same house in Lethbridge for 30 years after my grandfather died, and she was, without any softness in the way I say this, the only person in my extended family who ever treated me like I mattered. She taught me to drive in the parking lot of the Canadian Tire on Mayor Everyth Drive. She called me every Sunday at 7 in the evening until the last year of her life when her memory started going. She left me her mother's ring when I turned 25, pressed into my palm without ceremony, because she said I was the one who would take care of things. I thought she meant the ring. I understand now she meant everything. Nora had 2 children, my mother, Diane, who died when I was 11, and my uncle, Robert. Robert is 63, recently divorced, and has spent the better part of the last decade making increasingly bad decisions with decreasing amounts of his own money. He has a son, my cousin Derek, who is 35 and has never held a job for longer than 8 months. They are, together, the kind of people who look at a grieving family and see logistics. The week after Nora's funeral, Robert called me. He said the estate was straightforward. He said Nora had updated her will about 18 months prior, that she had split everything evenly between the two of us, me representing my mother's side, and that the lawyer handling it was a man named Patterson, who had an office downtown Edmonton. He said there was nothing to worry about. He said it twice. That was the first sign. I have reviewed enough real estate documents in my career to know that when someone tells you twice there is nothing to worry about, they are managing your expectations for the moment you find out there is everything to worry about. I told Robert I would be in touch, and I hung up. Then I called the Law Society of Alberta and asked if a Gerald Patterson was a currently registered practicing lawyer in the province. He was not. I want you to understand what that means. Robert had given me the name of a fake lawyer. Either Patterson did not exist at all, or he existed and was not licensed to practice. Either way, the will Robert was planning to present to me had not been prepared or verified by anyone with legal standing in this province, which meant one of 2 things. Either Nora had made a catastrophic error in choosing who drafted her final wishes, or Robert had prepared something himself and needed me to believe a lawyer had blessed it. I did not call Robert back. I drove to Lethbridge. Nora had kept a filing cabinet in the 2nd bedroom she used as a sewing room. It was a squat gray 2-drawer unit from Staples, the kind you find in every grandmother's house in Western Canada, with a small key that she kept on a hook behind the door labeled, and I want you to know she actually labeled it important. I had been to that house enough times over the years to know exactly where the key was, because Nora had shown me once, offhandedly, the way she did everything important. She said, "If something happens to me and you need to find the papers, they're in there." I let myself in with the spare key she had given me years ago, which Robert had apparently not thought to retrieve, and I went straight to the sewing room. The filing cabinet had 2 drawers. The top drawer held insurance documents, her vehicle registration for a car she had not driven in 2 years, and a folder of receipts she had been keeping since 1987. The bottom drawer held 3 envelopes. One was labeled funeral, one was labeled house, and one, in Nora's handwriting, was labeled will do not remove. I opened it. The document inside was dated 4 years ago, not 18 months. It was 8 pages, drafted by a firm called Hendricks and Okafor in Lethbridge, a real firm. I checked on my phone while standing in that room, and it was signed by Nora in handwriting. Witnessed by 2 people I did not recognize, which is standard. Notarized. I photographed every page on my phone. Then I put the document back exactly as I had found it, and I locked the cabinet and I left. On the drive back to Calgary, I ran through what I knew. Nora's real will was 4 years old, filed with a legitimate firm in Lethbridge. Robert had told me she updated it 18 months ago with someone who was not a licensed lawyer. Robert was the executor named in whatever document he was planning to present. which meant Robert had either forged a new will entirely, or he had found someone willing to create a fraudulent document for him, and he was going to use it to override what Nora had actually wanted. I needed to know what was in Robert's version before I showed anyone the real one. I texted him that evening. I said I had thought about it and I was ready to move forward, but I wanted to review the will before we met with Patterson. I said I was an estate documents examiner close enough to my actual job that it wasn't a lie, and I preferred to read things myself before sitting across a table from someone. Robert called me within 4 minutes. He said Patterson preferred to walk beneficiaries through the document in person. He said it was cleaner that way. He said the will was straightforward, and I would see that when we met. He used the word straightforward 3 times in 2 minutes. I counted. I told him I understood, and that I would see him Thursday. That night, I called the Hendricks and Okafor firm in Lethbridge. I explained that I was Nora's granddaughter, that I was concerned about the integrity of the estate process, and that I had reason to believe a fraudulent will might be presented at probate. The paralegal I spoke to was professional and did not react with surprise, which told me this was not the first time someone had called a firm with this kind of concern. She said she would have one of the lawyers call me the following morning. The lawyer's name was Sandra. She called at 8:15. I told her everything. I told her about Robert's call, about the unlicensed Patterson, about the 18-month timeline that contradicted the 4-year-old document I had photographed in Nora's filing cabinet. Sandra was quiet for a moment, and then she said, "Claire, I need you to understand that what you're describing, if accurate, is will fraud under the Criminal Code of Canada. This is not a civil matter. This is a criminal matter." She asked me to send her the photographs. I sent them while we were still on the phone. Sandra called back 40 minutes later. She confirmed the document was the one her firm had prepared. She confirmed Nora's signature was consistent with the executed copy they held on file. She said she was going to contact the Alberta Crown Prosecution Service and that she strongly recommended I speak to a criminal lawyer before Thursday. I had 48 hours. I want to explain what was in the real will, because it matters for what happened next. Nora had not split things evenly. She had left the house and 80% of her estate, which, between the property, her savings, and a small investment account, totaled somewhere around $460,000 to me. She had left Robert 20%, approximately $90,000, with a specific note that he was not to serve as executor. She had named Sandra's firm as the estate trustee. Robert knew exactly what was in the real will. He had obviously seen it, and he had spent 18 months building a replacement. I called a criminal lawyer in Calgary named Thomas, who had been referred to me by someone at my firm. I explained the situation. He listened without interrupting, which I have learned is the sign of a good lawyer, and then he asked me 2 questions. He asked whether I had removed or altered anything in the filing cabinet I had not, and he asked whether I was willing to go to Thursday's meeting. I said yes. He said good. He said he was going to make some calls. Thursday arrived the way bad days always do, gray and ordinary. Robert had booked a meeting room at a hotel conference center in Edmonton, which struck me as unusual. Probate proceedings do not typically happen in hotel boardrooms, but which told me that whatever Patterson was, he did not have a real office. I drove up from Calgary the night before and stayed at a cousin's place, and I spent the evening reviewing the photographs of Nora's real will until I could recite it. Derek was already in the lobby when I arrived, wearing a suit that was slightly too large for him in the shoulders, the way men wear suits when they are not used to wearing suits. He hugged me and said it was good to see me and asked how the drive up had been. I said, fine. He asked if I was doing okay. I said I was. We did not talk about Nora. Robert arrived 7 minutes late, which was deliberate. I recognized it as a power move, the kind of thing people do when they want to walk into a room that is already waiting for them. He shook my hand instead of hugging me, which was new, and he guided me into the meeting room with his hand briefly on my shoulder in a way that felt like steering. The man sitting at the head of the table was not a lawyer. I knew it the moment I looked at him. I have sat across from enough lawyers in my career to recognize the specific quality of attention they bring to a room. This man had the confidence, but not the precision. His name, Robert said, was Gerald Patterson. He had a folder in front of him and a warm handshake, and he called me my dear, which no lawyer under the age of 90 does anymore. Patterson opened the folder and slid a document across the table. The will he presented was 12 pages. It was dated 14 months ago, not 18 as Robert had told me. The signature on page 8, in Nora's name, was wrong. Not dramatically wrong, not the kind of wrong that a grieving granddaughter glancing at a page would catch. But I am not a grieving granddaughter glancing at a page. I am a title examiner who has spent 7 years looking at signatures. Nora made her capital N with a specific double loop that she had written the same way her entire adult life. The signature on page 8 had a single loop. It was small, it was careful, and it was not my grandmother's hand. Under this will, Robert received the house, 70% of the liquid assets, and was named sole executor. I received $30,000 and a note that described it as reflecting Claire's already received lifetime gifts, which was a creative way of saying Nora had already given me enough, and I should be grateful. I read the entire document without expression. Patterson watched me with the practiced patience of a man used to managing reactions. Robert watched me with the specific stillness of a man trying not to show how much is riding on the next 60 seconds. I looked up. I said, "I'd like to understand the process from here. What is the next step for probate?" Robert let out a breath that was almost invisible. Patterson explained that he would file with the Surrogate Court of Alberta, that the process typically took several months, and that in the meantime the estate assets would remain frozen. He said it was all very standard. I nodded. I said, "Thank you. I think I understand." I stood up, smoothed my coat, and said I needed a moment in the hallway. In the hallway, I sent a single text to Thomas. It said, "They presented it. I have a photo of page 8. Thomas replied immediately, "Confirmed. Give them 5 minutes." I went back into the room and sat down. I made small talk with Derek about his new apartment in Street Albert. Robert poured himself a glass of water. Patterson checked his phone. 4 minutes and 40 seconds later, the door to the conference room opened. 2 men in plain clothes walked in. One of them introduced himself as Detective Sergeant Kowalski from the Alberta RCMP Financial Crimes Unit. The other identified himself as a representative from the Crown Prosecution Service. Behind them, in the doorway, was Sandra from Hendricks and Okafor, holding a document that I recognized as the certified copy of Nora's real will. Patterson stood up so quickly his chair rolled back and hit the wall. Robert went completely still, not the stillness of shock, the stillness of a man whose mind is running very fast through very limited options. Kowalski placed a copy of a search warrant on the table and explained, in the unhurried way of someone who has done this many times, that Gerald Patterson, whose real name was Gerald Patton, and who had been disbarred in Ontario in 2019 for document fraud, was being detained in connection with the preparation and execution of a fraudulent testamentary document. He explained that Robert was being detained for questioning in relation to the same matter, and that Derek, depending on what the investigation found regarding his knowledge of the scheme, might be interviewed as well. Robert looked at me. His face had done something I had not seen it do before. The confidence had left it entirely. What was underneath was not anger. It was a kind of hollow bewilderment, the expression of a person who cannot understand how the room shifted without his noticing. He said my name, just my name, the way you say it when you are trying to decide what to say next. I picked up my bag. I said, "Nana showed me where she kept the important papers, Robert. She showed me a long time ago." I walked out. In the parking lot, the November air was the particular kind of cold that comes off the prairie in a way that feels honest, nothing soft about it, nothing forgiving, just the temperature it actually is. I stood beside my car for a moment and breathed it in. I want to be clear about something, because I think it matters. I did not feel triumphant. I did not feel the hot satisfaction that I think people expect from a story like this. What I felt was tired and sad, and something that I can only describe as clean. The way a room feels after you've opened all the windows. Nora had known, I think, that something might happen. That is why she showed me the cabinet. That is why she labeled the key important in her careful, practical handwriting, without drama, without a big speech. She just made sure I knew where to look. She trusted me to take care of things. The estate process took several more months. Sandra's firm handled it properly. The house in Lethbridge sold in the spring. Robert was charged with fraud over $5,000, uttering a forged document, and conspiracy charges that in Canada, under the criminal code, carry real sentences. Patton faced additional charges given his prior disbarment. Derek, it turned out, had known in general terms that Robert was handling the will but had not been directly involved in the forgery, which placed him in an uncomfortable legal position, but ultimately not a criminal one. He called me once, in February, and said he was sorry. I said thank you and ended the call. That was enough. I kept a few things from the house. The filing cabinet, because it seemed right. Nora's Sunday dishes, which are yellow with a small flower pattern, and which I use more than I expected to. And the ring she gave me when I was 25, which I still wear on my right hand, because she told me I was the one who would take care of things, and I did. My mother's share of what Nora left my share settled in the spring, $460,000, minus legal fees and the estate trustee's commission, divided according to what Nora actually wanted. My future, intact. Her wishes, honored. What I learned not from this experience but confirmed by it is that the people who try to take things from you usually rely on one thing above everything else. They rely on you not looking. They rely on your grief, your exhaustion, your instinct to trust family in moments of loss. They count on you sitting across that table and seeing a folder and thinking, surely someone has already checked this? Surely someone made sure this was right. Nobody is coming to check. You have to be the one who looks. Nora knew who I was before I did. She left me the tools to protect what was mine and the memory of a small key on a hook behind a door, and she trusted me to do the rest. If you have ever had to be the one in your family who looked when everyone else was hoping you wouldn't drop scene in the comments, share this if you believe that what people leave behind deserves to be protected.